while we're sitting down, we're going to tell marshmallow jokes or something about fireplaces. But thank you all. We're very excited to be here. The happiest place on Earth. We're going to talk about why it's going to be happy to do investment in space, right? So as Valerie mentioned, my name is Stephan Reckie. I'm with Angelus Funding, also with Gen Space, and also a board member of Space Nation. And I think we have an astronaut floating around somewhere in the audience here from Space Nation. And there we are, there's the astronaut, and I think the astronaut was hot, so she took off her helmet. So we'll give her some refreshments. But we have a very short time, and the timer is ticking down. So what I'd like to do is joined by my awesome panel here, have each of them quickly introduce themselves, say a couple of words about why they're doing space, and then we'll get into a very interactive dialogue about investments in space. So Candace, please, if you don't mind jumping in.
So hello, everybody. It's so nice to be here, and congratulations on a great event. I was born into a satellite family. Now, you might think that's very funny, but you know, how could that be? But in 1957, when I was 5 years old, of course, the Sputnik came. And I was given a little toy satellite, Sputnik, with Santa Claus inside. And from that point on, I decided everything good came from satellites and space. And it has been my, you know, I always tell everybody, you can do anything. Today we have the whole world in our hands to bring about change. And you just have to choose your weapons. And for me, satellites and space have always been the weapon that I have chosen to bring about positive change. And I think the most important thing today about satellites and space, when the world needs interconnectivity, connectivity, interactivity. We've just heard our friends from ESA saying data, and the immediate infrastructure that satellites can bring to solve that challenge is what drives me and what has driven me to do satellite television, satellite telecommunications, satellite mobile, satellite internet, and now today, Earth observation, space situation awareness, going to the asteroids. It's a fabulous time to be in space.
James.
Thanks very much, Candace. Hi, everyone. My name's James. I'm one of the founding partners of Seraphim Space, which I'm very proud to say is, as of today, the only venture fund globally that is focused on space tech. Which, when you think about the size of the space industry, to put this in context, depending on who you believe, the space industry is worth upwards of $300 billion. To have one fund globally, and we're quite a small fund focused on this sector, I think indicates that we are at the very start of a very long and extremely exciting journey that is going to profoundly change many aspects of the world in which we live in today. So why have we set up a space fund? Because we see some really fundamental changes in the sector that for the first time are really making it entrepreneur friendly. So in a nutshell, that's now the ability to be able to build and launch a satellite for under $100,000, whereas even 5 or 10 years ago, you were having to spend hundreds of millions of dollars. That is opening up the accessibility of space to just a much broader array of different people, and we're now seeing innovation being driven from the bottom up by entrepreneurs, including, I don't know if you're out there, Raphael, some of our portfolio companies like ESA, who are based here in Helsinki, founded by 2 young guys who dropped out of college, dreamed of doing something impossible, went and raised a bunch of money from Silicon Valley VCs. That sounds like a very American-style story, but it's happening now here in Helsinki and in Europe, and we're extremely excited to be uniquely positioned to help those companies achieve global scale.
Great, thanks.
Well, and from my side, well, you know me already. My name is Gonzalo, and normally when I'm asked this question, I always have a kind of funny story. So 10 years ago, when I joined ESA, I was in the interview, and they asked me, okay, if you got 1 million euros, where would you invest? And I said, well, I will invest in some asset funding, probably in some startups. Would you invest in space? And I said, no. So what are you doing here? Because I want that to change. I really want to be part of the revolution of space. I'm actually very proud to say that 10 years after, especially thanks to people like Candace and Seraphim, this is happening. I'm really very proud to participate in this, Because now, after a lot of years of working, having a lot of technology heritage, that technology is inspiring a lot of people to make global businesses, just to go into all interconnectivity, just to make big ventures like Seraphim. So it's a really exciting moment to be in space, and I'm very proud to be here, and particularly with my partners.
May I just say something, Stephan, because it's too beautiful. I did not know that you were going to tell that story. But when we first started Astra, the Astra satellite system, in 1983, there were no VCs in Europe. And the idea of a private person investing in space in 1983 was almost unheard of. But there was one gentleman who invested 1 million euros in 1983 in Astra. In 1997, when Astra went and did their IPO, he realized a 1,000 times return on his investment.
That's the name of the game. So 1,000 times is the goal to reach. So just real quick, so I'm also involved with putting together Gen Space, and Candace is part of the exciting momentum for the board. And at Gen Space, we welcome all global space founders to join an ecosystem that's very founder-friendly, very safe to share best practices. It's a unique venture. We're tying in with every space agency around the world, every continent, and we're trying to make this a fun thing. So let's get into the topic. We have half of our time left here. Why invest in space? So maybe, James, why now? Why invest in space?
Sure. So, I mean, I've touched on some of the big reasons, but I guess if I can find what I've done with my mobile phone, believe it or not, many of the components in the mobile phone that's in your pocket are now being used to build satellites that are as small as a shoebox or even smaller. So that means for the first time you can now launch constellations of potentially hundreds of satellites, which is just a total shift in the paradigm of the amount of data that you're able to collect about the Earth. So whereas historically, because satellites cost so much, you typically only put up constellations of maybe 3 or 6 satellites that might give you the ability to image somewhere once every day, once every few days, you're now beginning to see the types of constellations that we're looking to back that over time are going to be able to revisit and collect data about a particular spot on Earth or communicate in close to real time or certainly revisiting every few hours. So that enables you to just open up an entirely new range of different applications that are disrupting not just the space sector, but the broad array of different sectors that rely on space data. The easiest way to think about it is, what would happen if you turned off all the satellites and what wouldn't work? And the short answer to that is pretty much everything. So these profound changes in the space sector, which, as I said, is now only really building momentum, and we believe is a multi-decade trend, is going to ripple through every aspect of our lives over the coming decades. And we're just incredibly excited to be trying to find the best-of-breed businesses and the most talented entrepreneurs to back and help them achieve on their grand vision.
Great.
Good. Well, from my point of view, it's also really very exciting. I was going also to mention the example of the mobile phone, but I think that because we are in Arctic15, let's try to do something a little bit more different. So everybody knows that startups and SMEs are basically the drivers of the economy. But if you are a startup based in Helsinki, how can you scale? How can you basically start doing business in China? How can you basically understand what your customers want when they are in Australia? How can you communicate with your customers that are in the US? And that's space. Space actually can provide you answers to all those things. So you can have a startup, an SME, which is based in Helsinki, and can actually get information of what is happening in Jakarta, what is happening in Alaska, what is happening in the South Pole, can actually packetize it on a set of services and products to commodity traders that are based in the United States, or to people that are ready to do real estate business that are based in Zambia, in South Africa, and still provide business, growth, and value to Finland and to the world. I think that is really the perfect moment to start working in space and startups.
So I was, as I say, I was born into this satellite family, and my dad did do the first satellites for the United States. And he told me that when the satellite was first launched, people said to him, but Johnny, what are we going to do with this? And from that point on, of course, the satellite has inspired so many new applications, companies, infrastructures. And so for me, I think today is really the golden age of space, where finally the world and citizens have understood that space is our destiny, and that it is really just an extension of our Earth and of our universe. And just as we used to go and discover new places on the Earth, we are now going and discovering our universe and our extension.
So space is hard. Entrepreneurship is hard. What is the biggest obstacle for space entrepreneurs today?
You know what, Stephan? I have never, ever, ever seen an obstacle in my life.
Cool.
As an entrepreneur, you know, you just see the possibility. You know, when we first started Astra, or when I was doing Iridium, when I made a strategic investment now in planetary resources, people said, Candace, you know, this is impossible. I go, no, it's not at all impossible. I really think you must be barrierless thinking, and there truly is not any obstacle.
Well, I mean, the obvious one to say would be funding. In that, to your point, space is hard, entrepreneurship's hard. Although the economics of space have changed, you still typically need more money to build a successful space business, particularly if you're launching a constellation, than you would if you're just, for example, a software business. But the amount of venture that's coming into the sector is growing very rapidly. To put that in context, there's been more invested in the last 2 years than in the previous 15 years combined. So there's billions of dollars of venture funding finding their way into the sector. So from my perspective, I think actually the biggest challenge is on making sure that whatever you're doing, you're laser focused on, first of all, identifying an acute pain point for a big market and figuring out how to solve it. Space is very easy to seem quite inspirational. You know, we just saw a great video from ESA, but it's bringing that back down to earth, excuse the pun, to really work out whose problem you're solving and for whom, and being super focused on that.
So you don't have to be a billionaire to start a space company?
No.
Okay.
Not anymore.
Good.
It
deal.
helps.
They helped pave the way.
They did.
Right? So.
Well, from my side, I'm going to revert a little bit the question, because I think that entrepreneurs in space do not face many barriers. It's basically people that are not aware that the space can actually help them, the ones that maybe they limit themselves because they don't know they have all these capabilities to access a worldwide of information to power the business. So basically, this is a little bit like people like Candace, like James, or like myself are trying to do. We are coming here to tell to you that the space is open for business, and that is a wonderful opportunity for all of you. Just think, yes, you have basically to open your mind and don't think that it's expensive or difficult to access. No, it's not. It's easy. And if you have difficulties, we are here to help you.
And then on the flip side, we want to make sure that the investors know that space is investable, right? So again, you don't have to be a billionaire to invest in space, but you can get access to space entrepreneurs. Great. Another question would be, what would be the most exciting thing in space that excites you the most that potentially is investable?
Well, there are really lots of things going on at the moment.
One thing.
No, well, I know. Well, there are really lots of very interesting things. But for me, recently, we started to see how space can actually provide benefit to financial technologies. We recently have a trend there on fintech, and it's amazing the kind of things that are there. So now, if I will have 1 million euros to invest, for sure, I will invest it in a company that is using space for fintech.
Okay, space for fintech, remember that.
I think if I look at the applications of space that have the ability to have the biggest impact on mankind, the most obvious from my perspective is ubiquitous connectivity. Your ability to, wherever you are on the Earth, be able to access the internet and communicate with people. There are still billions of people that don't have access to the internet. I think bringing those billions into the connected worldwide market just has enormous potential in a manifest of different ways. So I think that would be the thing that I'd identify.
Great.
So I'd just like to touch back on this financing part. you know, when I first started in the satellite and space business, I was very often the only woman. And 5 years ago, I was faced with a challenge to help the Pacific Islands become connected via the internet. And so the only way that this could really happen was with satellites. And the Pacific Islands are matriarchal. And so just to show you the power of individual investment, we got all of the women on all of those islands. Some of them invested 500 euros, some invested 5,000, some invested 50,000. One of them invested 5 million. And we put together Oceania Women's Network Satellite. And today we are bringing high throughput internet to those islands. And every single one of our shareholders are only women. And you know, our investment has quintupled, but we've done so much more because we're bringing this internet. And if I were to follow onto James' point about technological and what's exciting, I believe that the next big step in space is going to have to be with harnessing brainwaves. And that this is the only way that we are going to be able to communicate with the beings and with our colleagues on Mars. And so that is what I am working on really right now as a personal goal, is to harness the communication of brainwaves and to teach our minds to be able to really communicate without any barriers.
Well, that's exciting. I'm looking forward to that. So we don't have to use Skype anymore.
No.
That's great, great. So who wants to go to space here? Does anyone want to go to space? So first of all, download the app from Space Nation. Okay, really cool app, iOS, Android, where you can enter a competition, you can go to space. The other question is, who wants to do business in space? Are there space entrepreneurs here, astropreneurs? Cool. So for the sake of the audience, how would they go about meeting you or talking to you, not to flood you afterwards, but what's the best way they can reach you or at least submit their ideas and their business to you?
Well, I'm so glad that you mentioned this. So my email, this is my personal email, okay, is Satellady. So SATELLAD as in David White, Satellady@gmail.com, okay? I do Skypes every Saturday morning at 8 a.m. and all around the world. That's how we started Oceania Women's Network Satellite. I would love to hear from you. Just write to me. And also, if there are any entrepreneurs who would like to meet me, also in particular, if there are any ESA big companies, EBAN does have a relationship with the ESA big companies, so I would love to meet you too, and Kimu, in the speakers lounge afterwards. So I learned so much from discussions with you who are on the cutting edge of innovation.
I mean, all the usual channels. We're open for business. We get to see more than 1,000 startups a year, so our doors are open, so please reach out. I'm hopefully meeting with some of you in the deal room one-to-ones after this session.
Any stage, early stage? Is it?
All stages.
All stages,
Yeah.
cool.
I'm sorry. I'll do the deal room too. I didn't have a chance to do all of the apps and everything. I've been traveling so much, but I'll be in the deal room right after this.
And Gonzalo?
Just for us, it's very simple. You can go to business.esa.int, and it's all information to contact us. Or you can go to Space Solutions, where you can also find all information for our business incubation program. And if you want more closer contact, here we have Miranda, Kimo, Elia, myself, and Luke, and you can always talk to us.
Great.
So please do so.
Thank you. And to reach me, either LinkedIn or genspace.co, which is our GenSpace website, or spacenation.org. Well, thank you all. We really appreciate you coming here and spending the time and sharing with us. As mentioned, we're available here afterwards, deal room, speakers lounge, walking around. Very noticeable. Thanks a lot. Thank you all.
Thank you.